Yeah, I started when I was 6 years old. My brother and sister would get all of these presents at Christmas time from the cast and crew of their show, and I was jealous. So I decided that I had to become an actor. My character's kind of grown up with Katniss. The beginning of the story, they're more or less brother and sister than anything. They're best friends. They've been keeping each other alive. It's a little frustrating, for the character. As the character, not as me. My father was a military judge, and my mother was a psychiatric social worker. My brother and sister and I were moved around constantly, in and outside the US, living in Germany for much of our teens. My brother and sister are both older than I am and were born before my father went off to World War I. Growing up, my brother and sister were my best friends in the world, and still are. As a brother and sister, our tastes were pretty different growing up. He liked a lot of early hip-hop. My dad didn't understand it and would try to talk him out of it. When I moved to London at age 16, tired of the shuffle around other people's houses and ready to live on my own, I met my English brother and sister, who instantly claimed me as family. Everyone loved my father. He was so nice that people took advantage of him. We were lower middle class. I slept in the hallway on a cot that rolled away during the day, and my younger brother and sister slept in my parents' room. My goal as a kid was to someday have my own room and to own a car, and I wanted to be able to take care of my parents. Until blacks and whites see each other as brother and sister, we will not have parity. It's very clear. We grew up in a nice house in a very middle-class area in Bolton and had a very happy childhood. My mom, Falak, who was also brought over from Pakistan by her parents as a kid, devoted herself to bringing up me and my younger brother and sister, Haroon and Tabinda, and my elder sister Mariah. Your parents are the parents you know best. Your brother and sister, if you have them, are the brother and sister you know best. They may not be the ones you like the best. They may not be the most interesting, but they are the closest and probably the clearest to you. My big advert was for ketchup. I come home from school, cook my brother and sister their dinner, ride my bike in the garden. Remember that one? People cried at that advert. It won awards. I was 12. There was a great strain in our family because my father didn't want anything to do with me. He was happy to see my brother and sister, but not me. I don't know why. Maybe it was shame. I don't know. But he never wanted anything to do with me. That rejection was terribly hurtful and it went on for years. When I was 4 years old, my brother and sister died of hunger, so I achieved my success through confidence, self-motivation, and my hard work. I was born late, what my mother calls the last kick of a dying horse. There's 3 of us children, but I'm 13 or 14 years younger than my brother and sister. My parents taught me to be optimistic and independent. They made me feel that I could do anything I set my mind to, which has really helped me. They didn't make allowances for me because of my height. I had to do everything my brother and sister had to do, including raising our animal menagerie that included cows and chickens. When we were children, every day after school, my brother and sister and I would go to my mother's office. It was full of pencils and marker and fabrics and beads. It was so much fun to be a child and to express my creativity through drawing and to playing dress-up in all of the wonderful and colorful clothes. I watched Billy Madison maybe 80 times. It's my favorite movie. Watched it, like, 1,000,000 times. My brother and sister watched it with me all the time. My brother and sister and I were latchkey kids, with a singer mother and no relationship with our father, and being in a firm is often about filling a void at home. For me, it was like having 50 big brothers. My parents called me their wise little baby. I was mature when I was 4 or 5. My brother and sister were older, so I was raised by 4 adults. I don't like to design single objects. I like my pieces to have a relationship to each other. They can be mother and child, like the Schmooze salt and pepper shakers, or brother and sister like the Birdie salt and peppers, or cousins, like most of my dinnerware sets. My father was very disappointed by war and fighting, and he thought language could help us out of cycles of revenge and animosity. And so, as a journalist, he always found himself asking lots of questions and trying to gather information. He was always very clear to underscore the fact that Jewish people and Arab people were brother and sister. I was the youngest child and got a lot more freedom than my brother and sister. I used to wander, doing my own thing under the radar, but I didn't get in bad trouble. Living in Flint, poverty is an obstacle that you have to fight through. I always had to fend for my brother and sister. I was always the one to sacrifice my meals so that they could eat. Labor wants pride and joy in doing good work, a sense of making or doing something beautiful or useful, to be treated with dignity and respect as brother and sister. I respect everyone, from the homeless brother and sister on the street to the executive that sits in the highest office named President Barack Obama. I respect everyone, but we over-respect no one. Getting close to books, and spending time by myself, I was obliged to think about things I would never have thought about if I was busy romping around with a brother and sister. I have a brother and sister. My mother does not care for thought, and father, too busy with his briefs to notice what we do. He buys me many books, but begs me not to read them, because he fears they joggle the mind. Most people, when they lose their dads, they go through a period of mourning and grieving, and time begins to heal their sadness. But we don't have the opportunity to heal. I know my brother and sister feel the same. The man was probably one of the most photographed people who ever lived. If you age with somebody, you go through so many roles: your lovers, friends, enemies, colleagues, strangers, your brother and sister. That's what intimacy is, if you're with your soulmate. I have a younger brother and sister who actually play in my band, and we were always into Disney music, big time. The first time I heard myself sing was when I recorded myself singing a Disney song. I remember it because it was awful, and I didn't expect to hear that. I think it was A Whole New World from Aladdin. I want to be alone and work until the day my head hits the drawing table and I'm dead. Kaput. I feel very much like I want to be with my brother and sister again. They're nowhere. I know they're nowhere and they don't exist, but if nowhere means that's where they are, that's where I want to be. We opened Panda Inn on June 8, 1973. The whole family, my parents, a brother and sister, all worked at the restaurant for free. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Gabriel and didn't have any money. Language is political. That's why you and me, my brother and sister, that's why we supposed to choke our natural self into the weird, lying, barbarous, unreal, white speech and writing habits that the schools lay down like holy law. I used to have 2 brown-colored cats, who were brother and sister, called Bonzo and Bonzetta. My mother was born on a tiny farm in County Mayo. She was meant to stay at home and look after the farm while her brother and sister got an education. However, she came to England on a visit and never went back. The only siblings I have are half-siblings. My nuclear family would have been an extra suffocating threesome. Instead, I have an interesting brother and sister, in-laws, and darling nephews. I'm a quasi-only child. With my brother and sister, I've more of a tendency to be semi-maternal. So, yes, I spent a lot of time talking to myself. I had this big dressing-up box and would just dress up as lots of characters and talk back to myself. Verging on schizophrenia, I suppose, if you analyze it carefully. When I was 8 years old, I was always starving. My brother and sister died from starvation. When you go somewhere like Kenya and you see how the children don't have pencils and pens, and all of these things are considered luxuries, and what a privilege they see education as and how hungry they are to learn, I wanted to give my brother and sister long lectures. That definitely stayed with me. My father worked every day, my brother and sister had to travel many hours to study, so Atletico were for people like us. No one can complain about earning good money, but for me, it's being able to help my family out, put my brother and sister through school, take my family on holiday. That's where I get the biggest buzz, not buying a pair of 500-pound shoes. My mom and dad put my brother and sister through university and they were very keen for us to have an academic background just to give us a chance. My elder brother and sister were both sporty and academic, and I think, subconsciously, I knew I couldn't go down that avenue. My brother and sister were much older. They were planned. I was not planned for. I was called the mistake, amongst other things. I think the most fun part about working on Good Luck Charlie is spending time with everyone, honestly, because everybody on set is like my brother and sister and mom and dad. They're so fun to be around, so that's probably the best part about working there. Back in Australia, I did foster care for sick cats for years, and I was always most successful with the animals when I was given two, a brother and sister. I do not have a family, per se. When I was younger, I grew up in foster care with my brother and sister. It was really a struggle, and knowing that there were people out there with tight-knit families really made my childhood an unfortunate one. I'm like a middle-aged person. When my friends go on about modern bands, I don't know what they are talking about. I'm into rock and roll, like Jimi Hendrix. Not so much because of my parents, who used to play a lot of Nina Simone and older blues, but my brother and sister. Growing up, I had a very normal relationship with my brother and sister, but, over time, they became my best friends, and now I hang out with them all the time. I'm very close with them. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.